Person responsible was a puppet master. They pull the strings and they tell you what they want you to do, and this is how you're going to do it.
FBI. Criminal Pursuit.
I don't have a lot of time. Those were the words of 46-year-old Brian Wells as he sat cross-legged on the hot pavement of an Erie, Pennsylvania parking lot. He was handcuffed, surrounded by state troopers, and he was terrified. Why? Because locked around his neck was a massive, custom-built iron collar, and inside that collar was a live bomb. In his pocket, Brian had a 9-page set of handwritten instructions. It was a scavenger hunt from hell. To live, he had to find keys and codes hidden across the city before a ticking kitchen timer hit 0. But as the world watched live on the news, the FBI began to realize something far more sinister. This wasn't just a bank robbery gone wrong. It was a diabolical puzzle designed by a group of fractured geniuses. The question that still haunts this case 20 years later is simple. Was Brian Wells an innocent victim caught in a real-life version of Saw? Or was he a co-conspirator who realized too late that he was the only one not in on the joke? To understand how this nightmare began, we have to go back to that Thursday, August 28, 2003. It was a muggy afternoon in Erie, Pennsylvania, a blue-collar lakeside city where people generally knew their neighbors and delivery drivers didn't expect to become national headlines. 46-year-old Brian Wells was a man of habit. He had worked at Mamma Mia's pizzeria for 10 years. His co-workers described him as childlike, a gentle soul who lived with his mother and spent his free time tending to his 3 cats. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. He wasn't even a risk-taker. He was just a guy who liked his routine. At 1:30 p.m., the phone at Mamma Mia's rang. A customer ordered 2 small pepperoni pizzas. The delivery address was 8631 Peach Street, specifically a remote TV transmission tower located at the end of a winding, unpaved dirt road on the outskirts of town. Now, think about that for a second. Most delivery drivers would be wary of a dirt road leading to a radio tower, but Brian didn't hesitate. He hopped into his beat-up Geo Metro and drove toward the edge of the city. What happened at that tower is the black hole of this entire case. There are no cameras, no witnesses, only the jagged puzzle pieces left behind. When Brian finally emerged from those woods and pulled into the PNC Bank parking lot an hour later, he was no longer the quiet pizza man. He walked into that bank with a stiff mechanical gait. Underneath a white t-shirt with the word "Guess" printed across the front, there was a massive rectangular bulge. It looked like he was wearing a primitive set of armor, but it wasn't armor. It was a custom-made iron collar, 3-voiced and locked with 4 separate padlocks. It was heavy, it was jagged, and it was beeping. But here's the detail that proves this was the work of a highly sophisticated predator. To make sure Brian did exactly what he was told, his captors didn't just give him a bomb, they gave him a weapon for protection. It looked like a simple wooden walking cane, but inside that wood was a masterfully engineered, homemade .22 caliber double-barreled shotgun. One pull of a hidden trigger and it was lethal. This wasn't a desperate act by an amateur. This was a quick win for the investigators, a sign that whoever designed this gear had a terrifying level of mechanical skill and a very dark imagination. The stage was set, the collar was locked, and the timer was already counting down. It's 2:28 p.m. The glass doors of the PNC Bank on Peach Street swing open and Brian Wells walks in. To any casual observer, he looks like a man in a hurry, perhaps a bit disheveled, but nothing that would scream terrorist. He's wearing a cane in his right hand and carrying a white plastic bag. But as he approaches the teller, the atmosphere in the room shifts. The bulky mass under his shirt, the guest shirt he had likely pulled on just an hour prior, is impossible to ignore. It's a boxy metallic protrusion that makes his torso look deformed. Brian doesn't pull a mask over his face. He doesn't scream for everyone to get on the floor. Instead, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a lollipop. He begins to suck on it, his face a mask of strange, detached calm. With his free hand, he slides a 2-page, handwritten note across the counter to the teller. The note is a chilling blend of military-style precision and absolute lunacy. It reads, "Gather employees with access codes to the vault and work fast to fill the bag with $250,000. You only have 15 minutes. It goes on to warn that any attempt to call the police or stall would result in the device around his neck being detonated. He then lifts his shirt just enough to show the teller the iron collar. It's not a prop. It's a heavy-duty double-layered steel band, hand-welded and secured with 4 padlocks. It looks like something out of a medieval torture chamber, updated with 21st century electronics. Inside the bank, time begins to stretch. The teller, paralyzed with fear, explains that the vault is on a time lock. She physically cannot give him $250,000. In most bank robberies, this is the moment the suspect panics. They start pacing, they threaten lives, or they bolt. But Brian Wells, he just waits. He stands there, sucking on his lollipop, leaning on his cane, that cane that we now know was actually a loaded shotgun, and tells her to just give him whatever she has in the drawers. He waits nearly 10 minutes. While the teller frantically stuffs cash into his bag, Brian is seen on the security footage acting almost bored. He isn't scanning the exits or looking for cops. He's just standing there. By the time he walks out the door, he has exactly $8,702. It's a fraction of what he asked for, but he doesn't seem to care. He walks back to his Geo Metro, tosses the bag in the seat, and drives away. But here's where the build-up takes a turn into the truly bizarre. As Brian pulls out of the parking lot, he isn't trying to escape. He's following the first clue in his scavenger hunt. He drives to a nearby McDonald's where he's seen looking under a rock for a hidden note. Think about the psychological state required for this. You have a bomb around your neck that you've been told is on a timer. You've just robbed a bank. The police are undoubtedly on their way. And instead of flooring it out of the county, you are stopping at a fast food parking lot to look for a piece of paper. This is the Act 1 Captain Climax that investigators would spend years dissecting. Was he calm because he was a victim who believed his captors would let him go if he followed the rules? Or was he calm because, up until this very moment, he believed the bomb was a fake, a prop designed to make him look like a hostage so he could keep the money and walk away clean? He wouldn't have long to wonder. Just 15 minutes after leaving the bank, the sirens started. The build-up was over. The conflict was about to turn deadly. At 2:48 p.m., the game enters its most public and pathetic phase. Brian Wells is pulled over by Pennsylvania state troopers in a parking lot just off P Street near an eyeglass world. To the officers, this looks like a standard high-risk felony stop. They have their guns drawn, shouting commands for him to get out of the vehicle and put his hands on his head. But as Brian exits his Geo Metro, the officers freeze. They see the box, they see the heavy iron collar, and they see the look on Brian's face. It isn't the look of a defiant bank robber, it's the look of a man who is realizing, second by second, that the people he trusted have left him to die. Brian is ordered to sit on the asphalt, cross-legged, with his back to a cruiser. He is handcuffed, and for the next 30 minutes, the world watches. News helicopters crest over the horizon, their cameras zooming in on the 46-year-old delivery man sitting alone in a circle of police cars. The footage is grainy, but the tension is visceral. You can see Brian talking, pleading, really, to the officers who are standing 30 feet back behind their door shields. "I don't have a lot of time," he tells them. "It's going to go off. I'm not lying." He explains the scavenger hunt. He tells them he was jumped by a group of black men at the transmission tower who locked this thing on him. He begs them to find the boss or get the keys. But here's the first major complication that the FBI would later use to tear this case apart. While Brian is sitting there, pleading for his life, he mentions that the men told him they were watching him. Yet, despite being surrounded by police, he doesn't seem to name any names he might actually know. He speaks in vague generalities. While the standoff continues, the scavenger hunt from hell is being analyzed by investigators in real time. The notes found in his car were a masterpiece of psychopathic organization. They were titled Instructions for Guest Hostage and were filled with warnings, maps, and even illustrations of the bomb's internals to discourage tampering. It was a 9-page manifesto that assigned Brian tasks to complete. But as the FBI's bomb technicians raced toward Erie, they did a mathematical audit of those notes. It was chilling. The time limits provided for Brian to drive from the bank to the McDonald's, then to the next clue at a road sign, then to a remote woods location, they didn't add up. Even if Brian had broken every speed limit and hit every green light, he never would have finished the hunt before the timer ran out. The complication was clear. This wasn't a game Brian was meant to win. It was a televised execution disguised as a puzzle. And then there's the beeping. The witnesses on the scene, the reporters, the cops, they all started to hear it. A rhythmic, high-pitched chirp coming from the metal box against Brian's chest. Brian's breathing becomes shallow. He starts looking at his watch. He starts asking why the bomb squad isn't there yet. He's told they are on their way, but they are coming from a distance. Every second of silence from the police is punctuated by that electronic chirp. As the clock ticks toward 3:18 p.m., the investigation begins to bleed into a different crime scene just down the road. While Brian sits on the pavement, a shadow is falling over a house on Upper Peach Street, the home of William Rothstein. Inside his garage is a freezer, and inside that freezer is a body. This is where the story stops being about a lone bank robber and starts being about a cabal of fractured intellectuals who lived in the fringes of eerie society. To understand how a pizza delivery driver ended up with a bomb around his neck, we have to look at the people standing in the shadows of that TV transmission tower. This wasn't a crime born of passion or desperation. It was a crime born of twisted intellect. Enter Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong. In the 1970s, Marjorie was the girl who had everything. She was a high school valedictorian, a brilliant student with a near-genius IQ, and a woman of striking beauty. But behind the academic accolades, a darkness was festering. By the time 2003 rolled around, the brilliance had curdled into a nightmare of hoarding and untreated mental illness. Her home was a testament to her mental state, a labyrinth of trash, rotting food, and stacked newspapers. But even in the middle of that squalor, her mind was still calculating. Marjorie had a history. In 1984, she had been charged with killing her boyfriend, Robert Thomas, claiming self-defense after shooting him 6 times. She was acquitted. Then, years later, another boyfriend, James Roden, ended up dead in a freezer. Marjorie wasn't just a criminal, she was a predator who collected broken men like William Rothstein. Rothstein was the fixer, a brilliant handyman and substitute teacher who spoke several languages and had a shop full of every tool imaginable. He was the one who allegedly helped Marjorie build the collar bomb. He was a man who lived on the edge of the delivery route, a man who loved puzzles, and a man who, when the heat got too high, called the police himself to report the body in his freezer just to stay one step ahead of the narrative. Then there was Kenneth Barnes, a local drug dealer and Marjorie's fishing buddy. The FBI's investigation revealed a motive so petty it's almost impossible to believe. Marjorie allegedly needed $250,000 to pay Barnes to murder her father. She believed her father was squandering her inheritance, and she was willing to orchestrate a televised execution just to secure her rightful fortune. Brian Wells wasn't just a random target for these people. He was someone they knew. He was a man they viewed as disposable, someone who lived in the fringes of their social circle, and most importantly, someone they believed wouldn't have the mental wherewithal to question the game until the locks were already clicked shut. The conflict isn't just between Brian and the police anymore. It's between the truth and the layer upon layer of lies built by a woman named Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong, a woman with a genius-level IQ, a history of dead boyfriends, and a deep-seated need for $250,000 to pay for a hit on her own father. Brian Wells was sitting in the center of a web spun by a spider he might have called a friend. And as the beeping of the collar began to change pitch, Brian Wells finally realized that the keys he was promised didn't exist. It's 3:18 p.m. The humidity in the eerie parking lot is stifling, but Brian Wells is shivering. The beeping from the metal box, a rhythmic electronic chirp, has suddenly changed. It's faster now, more insistent. Now, let's look at the game itself. Most bank robberies involve a quick getaway. This one involved a scavenger hunt. When the FBI recovered the 9 pages of handwritten notes from Brian's car, they didn't just find directions, they found a manifesto. The notes were written with a terrifying level of authority, using "we" to refer to the captors, making it sound like Brian was being watched by a massive, invisible organization. The first page was titled Instructions for Guest Hostage. It wasn't just a map, it was a psychological trap. It told Brian exactly how to act in the bank, what to say to the teller, and most importantly, it warned him that any deviation would result in his immediate deactivation. After the robbery, the notes directed him to a series of physical locations, waypoints. He was told to drive to a specific McDonald's and look under a rock for a jar with orange tape. Inside that jar was the next clue. From there, he was supposed to drive to a remote woods location to find a key that would supposedly stop one of the bomb's timers. But as the FBI's behavioral analysis unit looked closer, the cruelty of the 9 pages became clear. The instructions were filled with red herrings. They were designed to keep Brian moving, to keep him distracted, and to ensure he was as far away from the masterminds as possible when the inevitable happened. The notes even included detailed drawings of the bomb's internal circuitry. This served 2 purposes. It made the bomb look unsafe to any local cop who might try to cut it, and it reinforced to Brian that the people he was working for were geniuses. The meat of this complication is that the scavenger hunt was a sham. Forensic drive times proved that Brian could never have reached the final destination in time. The notes were a kill switch in paper form. They were intended to lead Brian into a remote area where he would explode alone, leaving no witnesses and no evidence. The only thing the geniuses didn't account for was the Pennsylvania State Police pulling him over in a public parking lot, forcing the scavenger hunt from hell to reach its climax in front of the entire world. The police are still 30 feet back. They are waiting for the bomb squad, who are stuck in traffic just 3 minutes away. But in the world of explosives, 3 minutes is an eternity. Brian begins to fidget. He looks at the officers and says his final recorded words, "It's going to go off." Then it happens. There is no massive fireball like in the movies. Instead, there is a sharp metallic crack, the sound of high-velocity explosives confined within a steel casing. The force of the blast is directional, concentrated right against Brian's chest. The guest t-shirt is shredded. Brian is thrown backward, his body slumped on the pavement. For a few agonizing seconds, he is still alive, his eyes searching the sky before the light in them finally goes out. The silence that follows in that parking lot is deafening. The news cameras, which had been broadcasting live to thousands of homes, suddenly cut away, but the damage was done. The pizza bomber was no longer a bizarre news story, he was a casualty in a game he couldn't win. But as Brian's body was covered with a yellow tarp, the real climax of the investigation was just beginning. When the bomb squad finally arrived, they realized they couldn't just unclip the device. It was a masterpiece of sadistic engineering. To preserve the evidence and study the internal firing mechanism of the collar, the authorities were forced to do something truly macabre. They had to decapitate Brian Wells' body to remove the collar intact. This act, born of forensic necessity, became a symbol of the entire case. To solve the puzzle, the victim had to be further desecrated. As the investigators took the collar apart, they found the fingerprints of a genius. The bomb was a booby trap within a booby trap. It had dummy wires, decoy timers, and a double-layered steel shell that would have defeated almost any roadside attempt to disarm it. The trail from the bomb led straight back to that house with the freezer, and to William Rothstein and Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong. Marjorie wasn't just a suspect, she was a force of nature. A woman who had once been a beautiful, brilliant academic, she had spiraled into a world of hoarding, mental illness, and cold-blooded manipulation. The FBI's final theory was a gut punch to the Erie community. Marjorie had needed money to pay a hitman to kill her father for her inheritance. She had used a local drug dealer named Kenneth Barnes to help recruit players. And according to the FBI, Brian Wells was one of those players. They alleged that Brian had been in on the plan from the start, believing the bomb would be a fake, a prop that would allow him to play the role of a victim so he wouldn't be a suspect. But on that dirt road by the transmission tower, the evil geniuses turned the fake bomb into a real one. They locked the iron collar around his neck and told him that if he wanted the keys to live, he had to get them their money first. The man who delivered pizzas for 10 years had been double-crossed by his own team. He died for a share of a $250,000 jackpot that, in the end, turned out to be less than $9,000 and a lollipop. It is easy to look at the twisted metal and the 9 pages of insane instructions and see Brian Wells as nothing more than a victim of a high IQ horror movie. But for the FBI, the math didn't add up. Think about the lollipop. While the teller was frantically pulling bills from the drawer, thinking she was looking at a man about to meet his maker, Brian Wells was casually browsing the candy selection. He didn't look like a man staring into the abyss. He looked like a man who thought he was at the center of a very clever, very lucrative prank. The FBI's limited participant theory suggests that Brian wasn't just a delivery man who got unlucky. They believe he was in on the robbery, but he was the only one who didn't know the bomb was real. This leads us to the question that has divided true crime investigators for over 2 decades, and I want to hear your take in the comments below. Do you believe Brian Wells was 100% innocent, a man kidnapped and forced into a lethal game he never understood? Or do you think he was a willing participant who got double-crossed by his own team? And specifically, if you've seen the Netflix series Evil Genius or followed the trial of Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong, let me know. Do you think she was the true mastermind, or was someone like Bill Rothstein, the man with the freezer, actually the one pulling the strings? This case is unique because every player in the game is now dead, meaning the absolute truth died in that parking lot in 2003. Your theory is as close as we might ever get to the truth. Drop your thoughts below and let's debate the limited participant theory. By the time the dust settled in Erie, the scavenger hunt from hell was exposed for what it truly was, an elaborate, multi-layered hoax designed to ensure there were no witnesses left alive. When forensic experts finally analyzed the 9 pages of handwritten notes found in Brian's car, they found the ultimate open-loop resolution. The final key, the one Brian was supposedly racing toward to save his life, didn't exist. There was no secret location, no combination code, and no mercy. The bomb was a booby trap from the start, constructed to kill whoever was wearing it the moment the timer hit 0. The human cost of this evil genius plot didn't end with Brian Wells. Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong, the woman at the center of the web, was eventually sentenced to life in prison. She died behind bars in 2017, taking many of the case's secrets to her grave. William Rothstein, the man who kept a body in his freezer and helped build the collar, died of cancer before he could ever be brought to justice. Even today, the FBI's limited participant ruling remains a stain on the case for the Wells family. They maintain that Brian was a gentle, childlike man who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a victim who was essentially murdered by logic, by people far more intelligent and far more cruel than he could ever imagine. Whether he was a co-conspirator who got double-crossed or an innocent delivery man caught in a real-life horror movie, Brian Wells remains the face of the most bizarre bank robbery in American history. A man who walked into a bank for $8,000 and walked out into a death trap. If you found the complexity of the pizza bomber case disturbing, and you want to see more deep dives into the most calculated and baffling crimes in history, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We go beyond the headlines to find the details that the news cameras missed. Join our community in the comments to help us piece together the puzzles that the authorities left behind. And if you're ready for another story that defies logic, click the video on the screen right now to listen to another case where a master manipulator turned an average person into a pawn in a deadly game. Don't click away, the next story is just as chilling. I'll see you over there.